All right, good evening, it's 7 o'clock. We'll go ahead and start the Board of Justice meeting. All right, our course of action today, of course, is consider the approval of minutes for our meeting on May 6, 2019. Have a chance to look at those.
I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve the minutes as stated.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
There. All right, moving on. All right, next on our agenda, of course, is to conduct a public hearing and take action on a request by Sam Lawrence on behalf of property owner Gwyn to Tran. Is that close? Close. That's not what I said it to make. For a variance to reduce the minimum front yard and street side setback from 50 feet to 20 feet on the property zone, limited commercial retail, C1 district. The 1.0479 acre site is located at the southeast corner of Cheezer Road and Miller Road in the city of Rowlett, Dallas County, Texas.
Good evening, Chairman Czar, board members. So as you stated, we're here to discuss, and I believe you can switch it there. We're here to discuss a variance request for going to Tran from 50 to 20 feet along both right-of-ways, both Miller and Cheezer. The site is located in the southeast corner of that intersection, and it is currently zoned for C1 uses, which is limited commercial and retail. The site area, as we stated before, is just over an acre and is currently vacant. The client, though this is just a variance, he is proposing to come back and do a development for office and retail with an approximate building or two building sizes totaling 10,103 square feet. The surrounding land use patterns are to the west you have C1, which is also vacant across Cheezer Road. To the north you have a church within a planned development. To the east you have a vacant single-family residential SF8. And to the south you have a multi-family attached suburban also vacant. So for the drawing on the left, you'll see what their proposal is, showing the requested setbacks being 20 feet from the right-of-way. Keep in mind that the right-of-way itself will include what we call sidewalks and amenity zone. So the road will still be 10 feet from that property line in most of these scenarios. You can see the subject property on your right and with the vacant lots adjacent to it. The existing conditions to your left, you'll be able to see that they place all the buildable area to the interior of the lot. So if you were to put say a 10,000 square foot building, you'd be forced to the center of it with parking pretty much all around it, kind of weird access points with a browsing lane, or it makes a very uncomfortable building scenario. Whereas to the right, you see what the requested conditions are, so they can push the building to a corner, kind of address the street a little better in terms of the visual appeal of a building within a landscaping buffer, and then throw parking and intercept the access points towards the back of the lot, creating greater separation from the actual intersection. Like I mentioned, there is still a 20-foot landscape buffer that is required per our code, and their requested setback does not in any way change that. We will still be expecting that landscape buffer to be utilized, and so that's unless they come back with an alternative landscape plan, that's what we're going to be expecting. the existing setbacks and limited lot depth create a conflict with respect to the access points and intersections and inefficient parking. And as I discussed, the requested variance would increase the buildable area from roughly 12,592 square feet to about 20,278 square feet. Notifications were sent at 200 and 500 foot radius, 27 in total. None were received in opposition or in favor. Our recommendation from staff is for approval of the variance to reduce the minimum front yard and side street setbacks from 50 feet to 20 feet. This approval of the request will allow for better dimensional flexibility for the future building layouts while not intruding in landscape buffers and creating a safer vehicular and pedestrian environment. The client has prepared a presentation if you guys want to hear it, but I'm open for any questions or any comments.
Thank you very much.
Any questions?
I did have a couple questions for you. I
Yes.
just wanted to clarify because I saw a difference between the staff's presentation that was sent to us on the agenda
Yes.
and the request that came in from the developer. We are just going with the front street and the side street from 50 feet to 20 feet.
That is
We're not
correct.
doing 18 feet or anything like that.
We are not doing 18 feet. I do believe I did see the concept plan being slightly different, and that was probably a mistake on our behalf. The one that I showed you on the one that's shown here is the latest and greatest.
Okay.
And so I'll leave it up if you guys have any more questions regarding that.
Sure, thank you.
I do have a question.
Yes, sir.
On this variance request, Exhibit A that was furnished to us, it indicates either 18 feet or 15 feet along with a landscape buffer. 15 feet, and you're requiring trees in that 20 feet or 15 or whatever you're going for, is that right? It says in here that you require trees here, periodically through there.
Right, I don't have the staff report with me at the moment, but the landscape buffer would still require the same amount of trees as we usually would. The code itself requires what we call clusters of trees every so often, and but yeah, the landscape buffer would be the same as our code requires, both along the adjoining zoning, which is the SF8. You would still have that landscape buffer in the rear and the sides, but also along the street, the right-of-way buffer.
Is there enough room for trees?
There will be the
I mean,
20
you're gonna
foot.
have a sidewalk in there, I presume.
Correct, and like I stated earlier, the right-of-way section, or if you call it street section, that will be happening both along Shiza and Miller, it does take into account a 10-foot amenity zone / sidewalk area, and so usually it has the length of the sidewalk in a 5-foot landscape buffer or landscape, usually sodded area. And then that's where the property line will start. That's the end of the right-of-way extends not from the paved, not just the pre-paved street, but it also includes 10-foot in either direction. And then the property line begins, you still have a 20-foot landscape buffer where you're able to put as many trees as you want on that area. So there will be plenty of space for trees.
Okay, I have one other question as well. What has the city done to take a look at this variance? In other words, the 20 feet, what is that going to do to visibility, traffic visibility at that intersection? It's an extremely busy intersection.
Correct.
And I understand it's also supposed to be widened to another area.
Correct. And so let me go back to this area here. If you were to look at the setbacks along this right of way, you'll be able to see that it does pull back. There, I believe, is intended to be a right turn lane, which does kind of slow traffic, but there's also a visibility triangle that you would also always have to comply to. Regardless of setbacks, the visibility triangle would ensure that pretty much 50 feet from the intersection in either direction, and a triangle connecting, or a segment connecting those 2 points have to remain visible. And so no building can be in that area, and trees would have to be landscaped so that the canopy does not cover that as well. And so in terms of visibility, we do have code regulations that would make sure, or rather would ensure, that visibility stays in place regardless of building setbacks or landscape buffers.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, yes,
Things that he was just discussing with you. Have you worked all these out with city plan, with landscape and so on and so forth to the city, and meeting their approvals?
Yeah, so I am the urban designer for the city of Rowlett, and so I work with the planning department, or I work for the planning department rather. And so these were all discussions that were had with the planning manager, Daniel Acevedo, and we can further discuss it.
Sure. So yes, we have looked. Can I see the site plan? We have looked at the site plan that was provided to you. The site plan essentially at this level is the concept plan that shows the location of the building, the location of the building setback. The image before you shows essentially the roadway right at the property line. And that is not accurate. There would be, like Carlos said, there would still be another 10-foot that is required for sidewalk and a green space before it gets to a roadway. So we've looked at it under those terms to say, okay, if we move the building setback from 50 feet to 20 feet, what is the impact on the landscaping? What is the impact on the intersection? And we've studied both of those with the engineering department and determined that would not have, reducing it does not have an impact on either of those two. The setback it still allows for the full required right-of-way buffer, which includes, a hedge road, includes street trees. But as Carlos said, some of those have to be held back at the intersection to make sure there's visibility. And then also, to what Carlos was saying, you can kind of see the design of the building where it's held back at the corner anyways to allow for that visibility. So that's something that we would ensure as development happens. So what you have before you tonight is just that reduction from 50 feet to 20 feet, and then we take it from there and we make sure it fits with all the engineering, landscaping, and those things as it develops on. So we feel confident that there's no issues.
You can see wires or anything that's underground, any issues like that?
No. It's out of any easements, yeah, it's out of easements and all that stuff.
We go ahead and approve this variance.
Yes.
So you're telling me that everything has been worked through planning and that you folks have worked with all the individual parts with the engineering and all of that, and you've got all that documented. So which way we go here tonight, if we have documentation as far as the city does, back up.
Yes, that is correct. So this plan has come in for full review through all the city departments, which include engineering, fire, building code, all the different departments the city touches. This plan was reviewed per that plan.
And you said.
Yes, everyone signed off on it.
Everybody
You're
signed
welcome.
off on it.
That's correct.
You're good to go.
Yes, sir.
Well, there was no reference in our packet to that.
Okay, I'm sorry. Well, that's just standard practice when we bring a case forward. It has already gone
I
through
just want to make sure
that
that the
process.
city is in agreement with everything that's going on here.
Yes, sir.
That if we went forward with an approval or something like this, that there won't be anything that comes back from the city that creates any issues in the future as far as an accident,
Sure.
lawsuit against the city, whatever it may be, that comes back from you talking about trees and so on and so forth like this, because it's narrow, what's going on there.
To clarify, the city is recommending,
Yes, yes.
Would you say?
the city is recommending approval of this.
I just want to make it clear.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Question I don't know the answer for, so I don't find the expanding of the Miller Road and Cheeser Road. Just that grassy knoll area down both sides is going to be taken up with that expansion piece, you know?
Well, if you look, let me see if I can get it.
I'm sure you guys are
You can kind of see here, these are representative of property lines that are set back well from the intersection. All of the right-of-way for the right-of-way improvements has been acquired at this point. There's a full design that's already done for that intersection, and so it accommodates fully that design.
If we go forward with this variance and we're looking at this piece of property, what does that do to the other undeveloped property around it? People be coming forward with that, asking to squeeze all that towards the intersection, squeeze that area up. Because if we say yes here and you say no to the other.
Right, you're speaking of setting precedent, if one corner develops one way, others would want to develop that way. There's nothing that says that the adjacent property couldn't do that and couldn't come forward and request that. The Board of Adjustment, it makes recommendations on variances, actually makes decisions on variances based on hardships. And so because of the hardship with locating at the corner and having access issues, because of the site being so narrow and eating up a lot of that property, staff feels that it's a hardship enough to warrant allowing that change. Again, if you look at the image on the left-hand side, you see that the building is really relegated to the middle of the property. So any parking pattern, traffic pattern, trash, all that stuff. So we think it's a hardship because of the size of the lot and because of the adjacency to the right-of-way. And so, for that reason, we would recommend approval. The lot, maybe to the west, might be tight, but it seems like it has another 20, 30 feet that they'll probably be able to work with. So that'll be a case-by-case basis. It'll go in front of you once again, so you can sort of, curtail that knee-jerk reaction to keep submitting for an adjustment.
Let me ask, so you have a presentation, you're going to kick out in a minute, right? Okay, so does it have pictures?
Yeah, that's helpful.
Just hold the question, I want to try to see what that looks like, so I have a couple of follow-up questions behind that, but I'd be interested to hear here. So, let me ask you something for the city right now. All right, guys, thanks. This time we'll invite you up, if you could be sure and give your name and address, please.
Sam Lawrence, 579 Bedrock Drive, McKinney, Texas. This thing that works for me every time I try to use this now. See if it works. So I just have 2 slides. I'll show you. Thank y'all for taking time to hear us tonight. So, like Carl showed you, we're surrounded by C1 already to our west and PD, C1 to our north, and some residential to our south and to our northwest. And our plan is to create a more beautified space by acquiring this variance so that we can create a pedestrian-friendly, accessible site that has more ability for multiple uses of businesses to have access to this site rather than more than likely would have possibly one business being able to be built on this site, but because of how the accesses were built prior in the existing conditions. With the current layout that we have, we get really good cross access now, and we're also providing cross access to future land to our south and to our east. And it's not something that we're just holding back, trying to keep as something to leverage to those people. We're just going to put that in because we want to see internal movement between the sites and keep as much traffic as we can off the roads until they have to move to the roadways between sites. And we'll be fully landscaping between the adjacency buffers between both sides. You were asking about trees. On the between the residential areas, you'll have one tree for 30 feet on the south and east, I believe. And then on the roadways, I think it's one tree per 50 feet, if I remember correctly. I used to do landscaping. The clusters are in, put really nice. So I think it's one per 50 or something like that. But if you see those little wells that you see kind of in the edge of the walkway, those are tree wells, and we'll put trees in those areas and beautify that walkway so that you'll have a nice feature as you walk through that area. And also by doing that, you have a school down the way that currently has no pedestrian access truly to get from A to B as they come into this area. So we'll be providing a nice access point for children and families who walk in that route to provide a point of access around the space also. And on the next slide, this next slide is the existing location. The existing, it really tightens down the site to where not only can the buildings constrain the center of the site, but when the original layout was being done on this site, fire had a really difficult time figuring out how to get around this building effectively because of how the truck has to come into the site and make very wide turns. It was very difficult to do that. You also couldn't get a dumpster on the site per code, not facing the road and being within the setbacks because dumpsters cannot be inside a setback. They have to be within the boundary of the setback as well. So you couldn't get a building and a dumpster and get parked and get sidewalks because once you put sidewalks outside a building and park it, your building becomes very small. So you end up having a 1-tenant building rather than what we have now is an 8 or 9-tenant building, which provides better, more sustainable footprint for businesses that are going to be in this area and for a long-term settlement point for business for Rowlett on this corridor, rather than possibly one business that sits here and succeeds your fast and has to be resold. So, also, like Carlos was saying, it reduced the amount of parking that you're able to do because of the way the roads have to work around here. We made parking and access to that parking very difficult. And like I said, there's restricted development space and potential undeveloped site for the future. But I'll take any questions if you have.
Questions? I have a couple of them. So, obviously this is a proposed site. This is not a finalized proposal. Obviously, this is what you're just trying to get that variance on, right?
It's conceptual, but we have a pretty good idea of the direction we want to go.
So the question I'll have for both you and the city will come down to a very unique question that's being set, and I can tell, is that being a retail center of nature, it kind of has an inward pointing type of approach this time, which is, I can't find any other like that in the city. The city always has an outward view to the main roads. You know, talking about Sophie's, that anywhere you go, the main entrance is coming off the roads, off, in this case, Cheese and Miller, but you have the backs of the building to that. So this is definitely a neat situation. You're trying to set a precedence for, and I'm assuming that the city is talking about this, is that we don't have anything like that in this city that I'm aware of. There's no inward type of building there, or any type of facing retail type center. Am I right with your Daniel? Do you know someone that's like that?
That's correct. Probably the closest that we have in terms of a model is to look at the form-based code neighborhoods, even Village of Rowlett. You know, you have a library right on Main Street, and then you have the primary parking behind that building for all the apartments. So it's very similar to an urban situation where you have the parking either on the side or behind the building. So I think we've been wrestling with and talking to him about, you know, sort of the two-sided architecture where you have, you know, obviously your primary access points will be from the mid-block, but then also treating, you know, Cheese and Miller like a secondary entry point where they'll still have some access from the sidewalk because there will be a sidewalk out in front of the building.
You will have access point. You'll have access from the roadway side. Your main access points won't be. You won't be able to park, and you'll access to the front of the buildings. That's more to make people utilize a pedestrian-friendly way of viewing the building. We want people to come in and
I think that's the kind of question I would have. Daniel, 'cause I don't know, we've never been faced with this board with something like this kind of conversation for what comes tomorrow. And you're right, all these are based on a case-by-case basis. But I am kind of curious, with this being the first time we've ever done something that faces an inward look, is what would that facade look on the outside, on the corners of Cheese and Bar? And then what would that end up doing to the other side, if you say on the southwest corner? If you have one that faces inward and you have one that faces outward. I don't know, just it was very unique when I read it. It was kind of like, oh, all right, well, this is a new precedent being set. And then as you get into, which again, we have to do on a case-by-case basis, but the precedent's being set as we now go on down the road, because I don't know what the anticipation would be for futures build-outs. There's some questions that came up here on this piece of it, which we'll address separately, but that is one first concern I would have, is what that would look like, is there's going to be a light right there, obviously, when they get all done with that. So I don't know if there's going to be a major issue of seeing around a tree over there, but the fact that there'll be a traffic light that will allow them to turn. But I am kind of curious with that new look, is if we approve this, then you'll push that thing all the way out to 20 feet. So does the city really, I mean, you say you pondered that whole thing, is there really not a concern now as far as changing that, doing something unique in that area?
No, that's not a concern. From the form-based code stuff that we've done, buildings have been allowed to go what we call zero lot line, so that would be the building right up to the property line itself. So you're talking about even closer, 20 feet even closer to an intersection where, there's street lights and things like that. I think, it's important to keep in mind all of the stuff that happens between the property line and the drive lanes. You can see in this image actually pretty good that from the property line to Miller Road itself, you have a substantial green space currently that will be reduced a little bit because the road will be widened, but there is still that buffer area. So that's why we feel confident. We've seen it work on a zero lot line condition, and so to have even 20 more feet, we feel confident that we can work it out. We'll make sure that all the visibility is in place, and that we'll make sure we have that two-sided architecture as well.
Why I get all that, I'm just kind of curious about, again, the precedent being set with that. When you pull to that intersection right there, you can see the back of the building.
That's not the, you won't see
That's
the
the question for you, is what are your
No,
thoughts?
you won't see the back of the building. That's not the back of the building. You see the face of it.
You don't have grass coming out. You can have grass in the back.
Yeah, that's the storefront. That's not the back. I think that's,
So you have
I think that's
access,
what you might be.
you have access from the back of the building coming in that way. in
Yeah,
the parking lot.
yeah, I mean, I don't know how to explain it.
As I said, I was looking for pictures you had, Dave, because this doesn't describe that particular piece, showing that view. Again, this is just kind of proposing. Like
I wish I would have brought, I didn't know the, I apologize.
That's quite right.
I would actually encourage the city to adopt this as a precedent. It makes sense finally. The form-based codes, we do all the requirements for buildings, and then what we do is we shove them in our parking lot. We make them screen the parking lot with bushes. So all you see is a bushes screen parking lot. This would actually push the architecture.
So this takes your building and it beautifies your street and the architecture. And then we have storefront glazing at the street level, and we have landscaping at a low level with some trees, and it will not be a back of the building. No, it will not be a back.
critical view for us to be able to look at, we can have off that view.
I'm sorry.
I said that would be a critical view that we can see.
Realize now you're telling us we're not looking at the back of the building.
No.
We're actually looking at the front of the building.
Correct.
So the entrance, you park in the back of the building, you can come in the back of the building, you walk down the
Right,
side.
and you still, and there's some assurances built into the code already, because the code requires that you have facing architecture on streets. So if you think of any of our commercial corridor here, just think 66, everyone facing 66 with their storefronts and with their entries. Those are because there's a requirement in the code that says there must be a certain amount of glass, of architecture, and things like that. So that requirement doesn't go away with moving the building up. They're still going to be required to provide the storefront on Miller and Chiesa. You're still going to be required to provide the architecture, the accent materials, and all those things. It's really now the challenge for the applicant is to, as on the inside of the block, making that appealing for people who park and find a way for them to get in the building. And they've shown that they can do that.
If you back up to the proposed plan, I think it's clear, you can see the sidewalk, the main sidewalk is still out towards the road.
You can also see that we built there's a breezeway between the two buildings. So there's an actual, you can actually walk between the buildings. There's a way to, it creates a circular movement around the entire building. So it's just not meant for one specific style of use. You can go from the back and through the buildings to the front and around the sides. I'm sure that, say we have a coffee shop or something in here, that's the thing to do now is have the back door, you can get in from the front of the back door of the coffee shops. I mean, I go to Frisco all the time, the summer room down there, and I go in the back all the time going to that shop. So it's a very traditional thing to do.
Do you have an idea what kind of business is going to go in? What's it's going to be?
I have not types of businesses that we're looking for.
We're looking for some kind of, internet, internet cell resistant, but the small
We
chip,
can't hear you.
small like
We
private.
can't hear you.
You come up with say like
Yeah, we try like putting like a small chip like Orange Theory or something.
I'm sorry, before you look for why you're staying out here, you might as well say it by yourself.
My name is I'm just Paul Pham, the husband of the landowner. Win Tu Tran is my wife, and I'm here just to answer to
What's your address, sir?
I'm sorry.
What's your address?
Our address is 717. The landowner,
Where's?
my home address is 717 Beaver Creek Drive, Murphy. And I'm sorry, guys, it's the first time here, so I don't
It's
know.
all right. You're going pretty good.
The first time developing too. So what I'm going to do is put there like the small gym, like Orange Theory, or right now it's a club, Pilates, those kind of gym that I want to put there, because there will be so many apartment and young people that will utilize it. The nail salon would be good for that area as well, because so many apartment. Maybe a donut shop or coffee for the community around that. And also a dental office, that's what I'm looking at. A dental office, that area.
This is probably the 3 top most recently put in businesses in this city, so I kind of get the pictures. So.
That's what I'm saying, like something that's internet resistant business that I want to put in there.
Okay.
I do have a question for either one of you two gentlemen, and that is, in your variance request, you had asked for 15 feet. Is the 20-foot variance going to substantially impact you at all?
no, I've already made the adjustments for the side. You should have had. Yeah.
So in the staff report, the mention about 15 feet had to do with the southern property line. There's a required 15-foot landscape buffer on the southern portion of the site and also the eastern portion of the site. So the request before you is on the north portion of the site and on the west portion of the site, and that is for 20 feet.
I think we clarified this earlier, the packet that we were sent has older information, which is
Okay.
for an 18-foot.
Right, and that's what I just want to clarify. All we're asking for tonight before you is the reduction from 50 feet to 20 feet on Cheese Road and on the road.
Yeah, we removed we were requesting some reduction on the landscape on that, but we took that out. We'll have all the regular landscaping on the east and on the south side. We just need the reduction in the face.
And the reason why that was eliminated is because through conversations, the applicant was able to conform to our current code standards. So there was no need to ask for that as a request. We were able to just remove it because they can conform to the standard code requirements.
If you would, one more thing right quick, that deals, I think, where Mr. Vickers was going. On this one of your considerations, you talk about this, tell me what the incompatibility buffer is.
Mhm.
That's a question. It says it which required a masonry wall but it says on the southern and western walls, you said southern and eastern.
Yes, sorry.
Because in that number 2, it says that, I would agree with that part, but I'm just saying this, in this piece, it talks about the southern and the western side.
Okay.
So I just want to, and then what is a incompatibility buffer?
So an incompatibility buffer is when there's a property that's zoned, in this case, zone C1, and it's adjacent to another zone that is not C1, which makes it incompatible. So it's a commercial to residential. And so for that, there's a more robust landscape buffer, which includes a wall, includes a hedgerow, and includes trees, I believe spaced 35 feet on center. And so to your point, yes, it's on the east side, which is incompatible to the SF8, and it's on the south side, which is incompatible to, I guess, the MF5.
I have a question for you before you sit down, please. Since we're talking about, the gentleman was talking about what kind of stores he may possibly be putting in there, a donut shop, salon shop, or whatever. And you're talking about the entrance facing the building with glass. And now you're asking for an variance from 50 feet to 20 feet. And you've got a high traffic area right out here in the middle. Say that we, hypothetically, we have a serious accident out at high speeds, and one of these cars ricochet off, or either that or something happens to a driver. Now, you've got a vehicle that's coming into a building that's only 20 feet off the road, it's all glass, at high speed, not just somebody in the parking lot who's stepping on the gas instead of the brake. You're saying that our traffic, our police department signed off on this?
Yes, sir.
And those things were brought up before them?
Yes, sir.
And they approved it?
Yes, sir.
And you got that in black and white?
Yes.
And then, one other question, speaking of for handicap, we're only showing 2 handicap parking spots here. Is that within, is 2 enough?
Tax requires 1 to 49 parking spots.
If that's 2 is going to be enough there.
It should be enough. Again, some of that's going to be based on the density of the building. It'll be based on how many parking spaces is provided. So ultimately, when we go through the process and land on that final parking count, it will be to code. You don't have to worry about that being approved today. We're just approving the setbacks, but we will make sure that that does happen. Our building department is the one who makes sure that all of our buildings are handicap accessible and up to the TAS standards.
Thank you.
That's good. We're just trying to bring variance. All right, is there any more questions that we have for Mr. Lawrence? No, so we're good. All right, that being said, of course, this is a public hearing, so we have to open the floor to the public. Is there anyone here that would like to speak for or against this particular project? You guys go one at a time. If you would, give us your name and address, please.
Ken Romaine, 3001 Martin Lane. The only thing I would say is we're concerned that the packet information provided to the Board of Adjustments does not seem to be totally accurate. I guess when you make your decision, you need to probably clarify those things for future. You know, I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. Oh, they're also citizens of Rowlett. If you can give us your name, sir.
My name is Robert LaCroix, 4517 Scenic Drive. And actually, I'm an alternate member. What's I'm going to speak English public.
Well, for the moment, you are a citizen of Rowlett.
I'm a citizen of Rowlett.
You have the ability to say something about this project.
That's what I want to do. You know, I've had a number of years of design practice, urban design practice. Actually, I've been in the business for about 35, 40 years, actually, in a sense. So I've looked at urban design. I understand the Rowlett's design standards pretty much. Actually, I understand the design standards of all the cities, Garland, Rowlett, Rockwall, Heath. I've worked in a number of these cities to know this. And I'm looking at this design, and I would believe from the standpoint of what you want from the city design standard, you would want the parking behind the buildings. To me, this is something that I would think the city would be trying to promote, as opposed to a sea of parking in front of the buildings. This actually has that parking behind. The key to it, from a design standpoint, is get the two-sided architecture. You know, get the architecture that looks at the street level. You're talking about landscaping buffer in front of it with the sidewalk. You're going to get that. Make sure that and that's not what this board's not looking at that. But what this board should be understanding is that really what you want to do is this is the kind of design you want to see for the city of Rowlett. And I would just tell you, I would like to see more of this design pattern for the city as opposed to the design of so much parking in the front, which we typically, with typical retail shopping centers, get, and get more of this urban design going in the city. So, you know, this variance is really the kind of variance you want to do, because it doesn't make sense. The other variance was, I mean, leaving the building in the center of the property, surrounding the parking, that's the typical thing you get. So if you want to change the city, this is what you want to do to change the city. Get the sidewalk in the front, get it pedestrian friendly, get the parking behind the buildings, and start doing this. I'm not clear necessarily of what I haven't read enough to know what our design standards are typically to put this kind of thing in motion, but I would suggest on these particular properties, and even on the properties that come in the future, that the city kind of promote that design. You're worried about the other corners of the intersection. I would say promote that design for the other corners of the intersection and tell them to, let's try to pull the buildings up and get the parking behind. We don't always want to drive through and see parking in front all the time. We want to see landscaping, we want to see good building design, we want to see, you know, two-sided architecture. That's what's going to make the city, you know, look more, that's going to beautify the city and make it more friendly to walk along those buildings. And, you know, and even in these little portions right here, this particular intersection, it still has design capability on those other vacant corners. So I don't think this is a precedent-setting thing whatsoever. I think it's good to do this and say the next person that comes in, from the city standpoint, let's look at designing it that way, is what they presented tonight. So I would just tell you that. I'm just giving you an opinion from a design standpoint. Thank you.
We appreciate that. Seeing no one else in the audience, I guess I think we should close the public hearing. And we'll come back, of course, and we'll readdress the board. So we have questions. I will make a comment only to the effect that there's only some confusion that perhaps we should probably make sure we get cleaned up, because it's almost like a lot of barriers begin to happen all at the same time as we're getting on our agenda. So that's a little bit of confusion for us. I understand the underlying piece that you're trying to get across. So I don't know that I'm against that as an option. I would just probably, because this is a hodgepodge of interpretations you guys have all put together. So I would just make that recommendation to you guys. But other than that, any other questions? I would entertain a motion. Good go.
I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the amendment with clarity that we are approving a 20-foot setback on the west and the north side of the property.
All right, we have a motion. We have a second. One vote. We do not have a second. Awkward moment there, so that motion has failed. So do I have another motion?
I'll make a motion that we entertain this again with not so much of a hodgepodge from the planning department. I mean, this is a mess. I'd like to see what what you have. this doesn't really reflect it properly. So if you could bring something back to us, I would say that would be my motion, that we would look at it again with a complete package.
Yes. I'm not, yeah, that's what they speak, I'm not sure that the motion requires something like that.
I just want to apologize. When I went and looked through the packet that was sent to you, and then the revised, the latest, greatest revised version, we actually inserted the version just before the final version, which, as we mentioned, eliminated the 15-foot request and went from the one that's in your packet, which says 50 feet to 18 feet, and it goes from 50 feet to 20 feet. So, yes, you are missing the correct packet information, which changes the buffer from, or the setback from 50 feet to 20 feet and eliminates anything else. So I'm sorry for that. We attached the wrong document. We checked it, 3 times and then inserted the wrong document at the last part there. So my apologies, and look forward to not doing that.
Information contained within the meeting, they presented a 20-foot setback request. That's
I agree, and I mean, for me, again, in reading this, I understand what's happening here, I understand what the request is. I don't know that I have, for me personally, an issue with paperwork being a little skewed when we're describing what we're going to vote on here is a 20-footer. We're not going to vote on confusion with that piece, we're going to vote on a 20-footer, provided that there is an actual, provided we get a motion that comes up. But again, that's only my personal, I can't make the motion up front, so.
Sure. And again, my apologies for the mess up on it.
Make a motion to approve the request as presented in the meeting today. 20-foot setback in 2 directions.
That motions have been made already, and has not been seconded.
Yeah, Chris, to avoid some confusion, I'll just go ahead and say, I just don't believe that what is being requested in this variance is a purview of this board. I feel like it has been failed to prove that there is an actual hardship here, that there's anything other than market feasibility or profitability. So with that, that's why I'm not entertaining or making a motion.
Dan, would you like to say some point about, again, why the city classifies, for the purpose of this comment, why a hardship is required here? That's obviously the way that we can approve or disagree is based on the validity of hardship.
Sure.
So please describe that again.
Sure. So essentially, what it says is that we, Board of Adjustment, make decisions based on physical hardships of the property that cause whatever that standard is to be a hardship. And so in this case, what the staff's position is that the 50-foot setback is a hardship because it creates an unintended condition at that intersection that makes it inefficient for parking and definitely inefficient for traffic through the property, which includes fire protection, a fire truck getting in and circulating the building. And so for those reasons, we believe it's a hardship. But again, that is on you to determine that.
I
Say
agree
not to.
with that. Chairman, your presentation has been real weak as far as the city. And it's taken a long time to kind of beat it to ground to figure out who's on first or who's playing this game. And I think in the future, when you come forward to the board, I think we need to come forward and listen to Smyrna here today.
Sure.
I don't want to hold these people at ransom because what we didn't get, 18, 20, or what we're going to get, we had it passed where it would be a 20-foot setback around the building. So, and you're saying the hardship is that the fire department came in there and get in there and adequately take care of the issues in case there is a fire, or ambulance paramedics are sent to the scene.
you're saying that's a hardship because of the paramedics and the ambulance and the fire truck getting in there? That's the hardship because of the way the building was designed versus the design that they're presenting, and that you're saying you're approving?
That is correct. Because the site is so narrow, adjacent to that roadway, it'd be very difficult for a fire truck to get into the site, whether you leave it at 50 feet or and circulation happens in front of the building. It'd be difficult for a fire truck to get adjacent to that building, or if they have access points going around the back of the building, it still would be difficult because of the turning radius is going through the back of the building. So again, because it's a narrow site, it forces the building to be in the center of the site, no matter what you do. So yes, it would be a challenge. It also creates some challenges because it's adjacent to the intersection, and so safety becomes a concern as far as those access points of actually getting into the site. So the more we can push the building up to the corner, the more you can circulate easily through the back of the property. And so that's why we think it's an appropriate hardship.
Could you clarify the city services requirement for dumpsters? As I don't believe they could be done per code.
Sure. So the city dumpster requirement is that you're not supposed to have dumpsters visible from the right-of-way. So you're looking at Chiza and Miller. The dumpster cannot face Chiza, cannot face Miller. So you have to turn it on an angle. Fire trucks have a minimum of, I forget off the top of my head, but it's about a 40-foot radius. So for you to achieve a 40-foot radius with the building in the middle of the site, that's even more stringent than the fire truck circulating the building. So yes, we do believe there's some harshness on the side.
With that being said, I'll go ahead and second that motion. I'll let city staff is giving some information forward.
Before we approve this, since we did some questions.
We're just going to be seconding, and then we can vote on it.
What we did, we already rejected the motion since we went second a moment ago. So the motion had to be made, sure that it takes too long.
Since there were so many questions, we will be on tape and get these to the document, the meeting has been documented.
Yes, that's great. It's recorded. I just asked one more question. Is any part of this going to have to go for P&Z? Are we all clear with that good to go?
That's undetermined. It depends as development occurs. There are different things that you can request through P&Z. One is a landscape, what's called an alternative landscape plan. So that might go before the boards if they so choose to do an alternative landscape plan. I believe that's pretty much it. That's the only reason why it would go to P&Z at this point.
All right, since more discussions came up, since of course the motion was made and fell, if there's a motion to be made, then I would ask for motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the amendment as proposed in the meeting with a 20-foot setback at the north and the west property line.
Go ahead and second that.
Questions about that? Then we'll take a vote. And the motion carries. All right, thank you so much. I would encourage us to, next time. But, all right, thank you so much for coming out tonight. We are adjourned.